Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Hot Mess Life Coach, Season 4, Episode 8. I'm your host, Brian Hogan, both a hot mess and a life coach. And with me is my co-host, Morgan Barbrett, a resilience coach who you can find all over the internet doing all kinds of amazing things.
Thanks, Brian.
This is the show for people trying to get it together while the world seems to be falling apart. And today we are going to talk about embracing your imperfections and what that looks like and how it can boost your authenticity and how authenticity can help boost your ability to embrace your imperfections. So with that said, Morgan, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this because perfectionism is something that I have struggled with a lot in my life, like setting really high standards for myself, and it has consequences to always hold yourself to a super high standard, and it does have consequences in terms of our ability to be ourselves and be authentic. Because if you're constantly trying to uphold a super high standard, then your brain is completely focused on meeting that standard and not so much what do I actually want, how do I want to express myself, who do I want to spend time with, and really any other questions of authenticity.
So perfectionism is kind of like a distraction in a sense, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Some people say that perfectionism is the opposite of acceptance. And in order to be authentic, we need to be able to accept ourselves the way that we are. And part of the nature of perfectionism is not being able to accept anything less than whatever high expectations you place on yourself, even if those expectations are, in some cases, not even achievable.
Can you give an example?
Um, of expectations that are not achievable, or
That
what
somebody, yeah,
specifically?
that somebody might still try to pursue, like an unachievable expectation that someone might still be like, oh yeah, I've got to achieve that.
So sometimes, like when a big goal is approaching and you have like a limited amount of time to achieve that goal, then the pressure to do like a lot of work towards it like is really really heavy for perfectionists. So for example, if I have a test that's coming up and I think to myself I need to get a perfect grade on it, you might like estimate that in order for you to get a perfect grade on it, then you have to study at least 6 hours a day for this many days in order to, make it happen. And then the sheer magnitude of the expectation, your perfect idea of how you're going to do it, becomes paralyzing and
Mm-hmm.
prevents you from being able to execute it, because rather than starting with an expectation of like, here's what I think I can do without absolutely paralyzing myself, you're like, what would be the absolute ideal, perfect amount that could ensure that I get, the perfect outcome, and and then it doesn't end up working out.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I definitely have experienced that feeling of like being totally paralyzed by my own expectations of how something should go or my own plans. Like sometimes I think like I'll make plans for the future and like then I'll be sitting there thinking about what the plans are and like suddenly these are plans I think I want them to happen, and then as I think about them and think about like how I might go about attaining them, I'll freeze, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, if I make one false move, if I take one wrong step, and then suddenly I'm taking no steps and making no moves because I want it to be just right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very common, or I guess like foundational attitude of perfectionism is I I want to do something perfectly, and if I can't do it perfectly, or if I think that I'm not going to succeed at doing something in the way that is my ideal, then I won't do it at all.
Yeah,
Because if I don't do it that way, if I don't do it the right way, then I'm a failure, and if I feel like my identity is a failure, then of course I don't want to do it, or I'm not
yeah.
going to be able to motivate myself to do it.
So this perfectionism, then what we're discovering is that it causes either you to freeze
Yes.
or it causes you to get totally stressed and miserable because you're not going to the outcome isn't going to be what you want. So you
Yes.
either have unrealistic expectations and you get disappointed, or you have unrealistic expectations and you get frozen. At least I
Yes.
find that's what's happening for me too, oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
And like this reminds me of a story. I was in first grade, maybe kindergarten. I think first grade, and we all had to paint these. we didn't have to. It was art class. So we're like all painting pictures, right? And I paint this beautiful watercolor, and like, if I do say so myself, it was a fucking beautiful watercolor.
You
Oh
said
my,
this is kindergarten, first grade.
first grade, no, but it was amazing. Like it was a sunset, and there were little eagles, and I was like so proud of it. And I was like,
Hmm.
I mean, I was just, and honestly, I think it was like the best one in the class. Like
Okay.
far and away, it was the best one. I think I even overheard teachers talking about how good my painting was when I was sitting there painting it. And that, I do. I mean, I really do think I remember this. Like, I think so. And
I
then
love how vivid this is for you.
it's vivid because it's crushingly disappointing. So just wait a second.
Okay. Okay.
So I paint this beautiful picture. It's the best one. Everyone says so. And our parents are coming in later one day to like see us do like some kind of a variety show or some crap, and all of our paintings are like up on the wall, like above, like lining the room, like the way stencils do in a nursery. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And oh, before that part, when I was doing the painting, I thought to myself, you know what would make this perfect? A boat. Everything else was a watercolor. And a boat, you need to like paint, like you need acrylic or something. I'm a
Yeah.
kindergarten, I'm a first grade, so I don't know that. So I start painting the boat, a black boat with my black watercolors. Exactly.
Oh no!
Yes, thank you. Oh my God, just your reaction is healing me because this really, really bothers me. And this black splotch just goes, it spreads out everywhere across my painting. And so now
Ruining all of your work.
kind of like it ruins this like bottom corner. So like if my part of the screen is the painting, like this part is now all a black splotch, but the rest of it you can see this like beautiful sunset that should have been painted by a 40-year-old, and this like amazing water and cresting waves, and like you know, Picasso would have been drooling over it in my opinion, but except this black splotch, right? And it was because I thought I need to make this perfect, and it's not perfect. And then when the black splotch got there, it was clearly not perfect, and my desire for it to be perfect caused misery, like total and
Yeah.
utter misery. And so that's like sort of my point with this is like when we really get married to things turning out perfectly, we are setting ourselves up for a miserable experience because perfection is fantasy. And so we're aligning our expectations with some kind of fiction, which means that
Yeah.
our expectations cannot ever be met then. And so we
Yeah.
end up in misery.
Hmm. And the expectations are something that is not existing in nature. It's something that we make up ourselves. It's something that is only existent in our heads, right? But this, I love this example of the painting because you know what we're talking about here is like embracing imperfection because that can help us with authenticity. And like had the perfectionism not been so intense, right? What do you think someone would do if they were really good at embracing imperfection and after the black splotch came out of the painting? What might they do?
Set it on fire and stab the students next to them.
No,
Oh,
no.
okay, wait.
That's what a perfectionist would do, actually, right?
Okay, all right, sorry. Let me try again. Let me try again. They would beat up the teacher.
No.
Oh, okay. You tell me. I'm clearly not getting it.
Oh my gosh. Like this new thing is now on your painting, and if so, the opposite of perfection is acceptance. So if we accept what is, we accept that now there's this black splotch on the painting.
But it was unacceptable.
It was unacceptable. But if you at least look at this black splotch and you're like, it is what it is, then you might then be opened up to the opportunity to paint something over it.
Oh, oh, oh.
To adjust, to find another way to handle this now unexpected circumstance that you hate, and it's okay to hate it, but you don't have to be in so much misery. You can you can adapt if you embrace the fact that it's not perfect,
Oh
and
my
then
God.
something different can come out of it.
Yes, you're so right. It's so true. And in fact, you just reminded me of a slight continuation to this story. So this black splotch thing really bothers me. I don't know if you can still tell, but it really
Yeah.
disappoints me. Like I think to myself, like sometimes when I think about that story, I think to myself, that was my chance to be an artist and get discovered. And somebody's parent in that room was like a curator of a museum, and they would have plucked me out of obscurity and put me on a totally new path, except for the black splotch. And so now my whole life is ruined, and I'm just stuck being a life coach, all because of a black splotch. So anyway, that's literally how sometimes it would impact me, especially in my younger years. And
Yeah.
I would think about it pretty often, because it was like, this was my chance to show everybody how awesome I am, which is, I think, also
Yeah.
what's behind perfectionism in general, is we want to show the world how much we're the shit. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
we have this external focus. And so we're already disconnected from ourselves. Anyway, before I go off
Mhm.
on that, what happened was, in my maybe like 12, 13 years old, my mom pulled this like box of memories out of the attic, and lo and behold, in there was the black splotch painting. And I was like, oh my God, a trigger warning. You know what I mean? Like, I did not expect to see this today. I was like a 12-year-old. I was like, oh shit. I hate it. I hate this memory. I hate the splotch. So my mom just like noticed me sort of have my freak out about whatever, like my mini freak out, I guess, about the black splotch. Go to school. I come home, and on the stairs is the framed in beautiful glass my watercolor. But the watercolor was like, the shape of it was like this like long, almost like a legal pad shape, like that,
Yeah.
like long and skinny, like, and so the splotch was in the bottom corner. So my mom folded the bottom third behind. So all you saw was this beautiful sunset and a beautiful ocean, and you could see this little tiny like black mound that would have been the top of the sail, which now just kind of looked like a rock or whatever. And so
Yeah.
now my painting was hanging on her wall, and it was almost a square, like slightly less of a rectangle, and it looked perfect, because my mom embraced the imperfection of the splotch and figured a way to do something with it, which is kind of like what you were saying, like what I could have done, like had I not been so married to the perfection. Also, I was 6 or 7, so like I'm having compassion on myself. So viewers out there, like if you're a 7-year-old and you happen to be watching this, there is no pressure for you to like know how to handle your imperfections. Find an adult who will comfort you. However, embracing the imperfection, which is what my mom did, and my mom modeled that for me as a 13-year-old, and it made me so happy, and it like redeemed the picture, and it brought it totally back, and like sort of changed the nature of that memory at least a little bit. Sometimes I still do think I should look up all of those kids' parents and find out which one was the art curator, but I don't know.
Man, that's such a powerful story, Brian. I can't believe you just pulled that out of nowhere. Um, so the thing that I'm noticing as you tell that is that the fact that there was a mistake, fact that there was like a flaw or something that didn't go as planned, did not erase, like in actual physical existence. It did not erase the beauty of the work that you had done. It may have like splotched it a little bit, right? Down in the one specific corner, but it didn't mean that you hadn't done what you had done. It didn't erase it. And when you're going at things with like a perfectionistic mindset, we feel like if there's any flaw at all, it absolutely destroys, removes, erases any good thing that you've ever done. And so, and that's like part of what makes like perfectionism so like hurtful to ourselves, is like you literally cannot appreciate all or celebrate all the good things that you've done, because all you can focus on is this one thing that didn't go the way that you wanted it to. And like, how sucky is that for like the little version of yourself inside of you that just wants to like feel good about what they do. They just keep pushing and pushing harder and harder, and never getting any credit for anything that they do because you're so focused on what went wrong.
Yeah. Because there's a part of us that wants everything to be perfect, but there's another part of us that just wants to celebrate all the beautiful wins and all the
Mm-hmm.
beautiful moments, even if they have nothing to do with achieving anything.
Yeah.
But that part gets blocked by our desire to achieve, like full on blocked. like
Yeah.
like the story I was telling you before we got on about, like, I'm in a counseling program now, and like I have it in the back of my head that I want to get straight A's, right? Like I have straight A's and I'm getting straight A's, but even at times when it was like really, really, really stressful, I was still working really hard for the A. And another person in my cohort is always reminding me like, bees get degrees, bees get degrees, you know? And I love that when she says it. I'm like, oh, that resonates so much. Yeah, I can just throttle back and get a B. And then I find myself like in the thick of it, like not throttling back, not getting a B, and being really stressed out. And it's like the further along I am down the transcript and like I see all the A's there, the harder and harder it is for me to want to like let myself drop back and like so get one A minus or one B. It feels like the black splotch all over again.
Yeah. And this is what makes it really difficult to embrace imperfection or to let things be imperfect, is that we start to attach our identity to our perfect performance. And therefore, if we feel like, you know, oh, like if I was doing something perfectly and all of a sudden I start doing it not perfectly, then that means something about who I am. That means I'm a failure. That means that I'm not smart. That means that I'm whatever. When it doesn't actually mean any of those things. It could mean that you're deciding to prioritize your well-being over sacrificing sleep over getting your A. But your ego, like our brains just want to make it mean something about who we are as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very hard when our identity is caught up in what we achieve or what we're trying to do, which is still something I'm working through. Like just because we're two life coaches here doesn't mean we actually have all of our shit together all the time. That's why I say it's the show for people trying to get it together, because I'm one of those people trying to get it together. And it is very difficult to keep yourself emotionally centered when your identity is tied up with your performance, because your performance won't always be the same. This reminds me of the fourth agreement from our talks way back in the spring, and like the always do your best part, and your best is going to change sometimes. So as
Yeah.
when your best is less than what it was yesterday, does that really mean that that there's something off about you? You know what I mean? Or that that there's something bad, or that you're not enough? But it feels that way when what we do is tied in with our identity,
Yeah.
which is a huge thing in our culture. Like that's just our culture promotes this idea that your identity should be tied into what you do. So not only does
Yeah.
culture promote it, but it's bad for us. And so culture's promoting this thing, and we have to navigate around this thing in order to like find our authenticity so that we can let ourselves off the hook from the need to be perfect, because we're then essentially letting ourselves off the hook from the need to be a fantasy. And wouldn't you rather
Mhm.
be a real person than fantasy?
I certainly would. I love that you brought up the four agreements because uh, for anybody listening, Brian gave me a copy of the four agreements when we were on one of our retreats with our other life coach friends, and that book changed my life mostly because of the fourth agreement. Because the way that my perfectionism manifested in college was that the way that I rationalized it was that if I always try my best at everything, then I can't blame myself if something goes wrong. But what that actually resulted in was if I, like, no matter how much effort I put in, if something didn't go my way, then I would tell myself that it must have been because I wasn't trying my best. And so no matter how much effort I put in, I could never put in enough effort if the result was not perfect. And so I say this to bring up that reading the four agreements and reading the fourth agreement specifically, which says always do your best, reframed it for me, because it talks about how doing your best is not putting in the absolute maximal possible effort and then having the best outcome. That's not what doing your best means. What doing your best means is being honest and in assessing what can I do? What's realistic of me to expect of myself? And then doing that, but being compassionate about it and being willing to accept, opposite of perfection, being willing to accept whatever my limit is today.
Mm, yeah. And not violating our own capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, because I would always like my like previous understanding of doing my best was like overriding my my capacity and sacrificing my health and wellness to do so. And that is not doing your best, because then you end up facing consequences in other places, and so you can't do your best in other things. When you're not in balance and being very like self-aware or like assessing with yourself, what can I actually do? What is realistic of me to assess of my abilities?
Yeah, and without negative fallout in another area, because it's like
Yeah,
maybe you can study for 9 hours, maybe you have that capacity, but if you
yeah,
actually push yourself to that studying for 9 hours, then you are underslept, or you do end up with like stress or something. You know what I mean? So
hmm,
when we talk about capacity, we don't mean your ability before you're exhausted. We mean your
hmm,
capacity before anything else in your life starts to go wrong or go out of balance.
yeah, exactly. Like, well, in that example for like taking a test, if let's say that the maximum amount that I can possibly study is like 9, 10 hours the night before the test, but then I go to the test and I fall asleep during the test,
Yeah.
miss the
Oh,
whole thing, right?
backfire.
Yeah, backfire. That is not doing your best. It's not. So even if you succeed at like forcing yourself to do this like imagined idea of like what is the most amount I can do blank, if you have to pay for it somewhere else, if you have to face consequences for pushing yourself, that's not your best.
Yeah. So as we round the corner here on this podcast today, let's bring embracing our imperfection around to authenticity. And how does embracing our imperfections allow us to be more authentic, or how does embracing our authenticity allow us to embrace our imperfections?
I think embracing imperfection makes it easier to be authentic because then you like instead of having all of your effort be uh like going towards meeting some sort of expectation, whether that's one that you place on yourself or one that other people have, because there's two kinds of there's three kinds of perfectionism, but one of them is like self or oriented, and another one is like socially prescribed. So sometimes it's stuff that you place on yourself, and sometimes it's stuff that like, oh, I notice other people have expectations and I need to meet those or else I will be judged, right?
Mm-hmm.
um and so if if we are able to embrace imperfections and flaws, then our focus can be less on what is right and more on what do I want? What feels right to me? What feels aligned with my values, my spirit, my preferences? It almost like perfection is kind of like a separate goal. I don't know how to explain that very clearly, but it's if me being my whole unapologetic self is here, like me being some arbitrary prescribed version of perfect is over here. And if I'm putting all my effort into coming over here, then I'm going to miss opportunities to come here.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's beautiful. That makes a lot of sense. That was super clear. And it reminds me of a Psychology Today article that I read this week in preparation for this today. It was actually called Embracing Imperfections. So
Okay.
it was an easy find online. And in the article he talks about how we believe on some level that other people are perfect. And so that's why we strive for perfection. Like we don't it's not like it's not like we believe really that we're supposed to be perfect. Like we just believe on some deeper level that everyone is perfect. Like social media pushes us into that belief, and like, the whole grass is always greener thing pushes us into that belief. And in the end, what he kind of boiled it down to is like nobody's perfect, but it's hard for us to see that other people are struggling too. And what we want to be striving for is connection instead of perfection, because
Yeah,
perfection can actually be very isolating too, because
it is.
we think everybody's perfect, and then so we go and try to be perfect, and then suddenly we end up veering off into like pretend land in order to pretend we're perfect while we're on our way to perfect, so that everybody can see that we're perfect as we become perfect, so that nobody will see that we're really not perfect. And then suddenly we're in a totally performance oriented place with a social mask, and we're alone, and we're scared that people are going to find us out. And so
Hmm.
perfection actually can really cut you off from connection,
Yeah.
and you need connection in order to be your authentic self, or you need your
Yes.
authentic self rather to really have deep connection, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that like relates to, any deep relationship. In order for you to really be a strong team and feel connected to another person, you need some amount of vulnerability. If you're never honest about, how you're really feeling or things that aren't going perfect for you, or what you're struggling with, then you don't really have an opportunity to connect with that other person on that or work with them on that and receive support like for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So imperfection is like a gift, and
Yes.
perfection is like a curse that separates us and makes us miserable and distracts us from the truth of who we are. So remember that, everybody. And show us who you really are, warts and all.
Warts.
Mo, do you have anything else you want to add to this topic?
I think in terms of like if people want to cultivate like the skill of being able to embrace imperfection when you notice that there is a flaw or a mistake or something doesn't go as planned, you want to ask like A, what could be good about this? And B, like, how can I learn from this thing that's not working out? Because, like, we'll have a tendency to like catastrophize mistakes like you did with your boat. You catastrophized it and we're like, oh, this means that my entire future is like doomed, right? Um, to
Well, it
just
was,
shift.
it was an actual catastrophe.
Right. Yeah. So you catastrophize it in your mind. And if you can find a way to ask yourself questions that help you see it in a different way, in any other way that's not quite as catastrophized, then that is a strong practice to help you not feel so taken out when things don't go perfectly.
That's really good. That's really helpful. And it makes me think another thing we can add to that is like when you notice a mistake or when you notice a flaw or an imperfection, what you can also do is just try to notice like how it's triggering you. Like what's
Mhm.
happening? How is it making you nervous? How is it making you feel the need to rush or fix or rescue or hide? And then just
Mhm.
notice that, because the more you notice, the more self-awareness there is, and self-awareness is like a big giant catalyst for transformation. So when you notice
Yes.
what's going on inside of you, what like that little part that maybe is striving to be perfect in that moment, or that part that wants to over explain, and then you can just give that part a little bit of your gentleness once you become aware of it.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mo. This
Absolutely.
was a really fun conversation. I always learn so much when we have these talks.
I do too. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it. And if you want to find out more about Morgan and what she does, you can do so online at selfloveatlas.coach or on Instagram at Morgan Barbrett. And if you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can find me on at thebrianhogan.com or on social medias at thebrianhogan. Otherwise, we will be here again next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, be hot, be messy, and be blessed. Much love, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.